Hello and welcome back to QuickBooks Online, this special course edition, okay, where I'm going to be diving into expenses because when we are looking at the way that a business is being formed, as you remember from chapter 1 and 2, we're starting our company file as if we're starting from scratch, right? And we're just going to plug in as much information as we need. So the first thing that we should be occurring is we're going to skip over chapter 3, which is the sales section, right? Well, you can't sell anything if you don't have the items readily available to sell. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and proceed to section 4 here, chapter 4, where we're going to look at managing expenses because there are things that we need to pay for ahead of time before we can actually start opening up our shop and start selling our goods and services, okay? So first thing that we're going to take a look at here is here's the topics that we're going to be learning in chapter 4, okay? So, you guys, for this one, right, we're not going to be following the book inside the book, but we are going to be doing the practice problems. That's what we're going to be covering in here. So we're not going to be doing Craig's landscape. We will be doing Imagine photography, okay? So if you have your QuickBooks Online page open and ready to go, this is where here you go, we start. So we're going to start with chapter 4. Okay, so first thing that we have to understand is going to be configuring the expenses settings. So then again, so if you remember from chapter 2, right, we experience what it's like to look through the company settings, right? So in this case, we're going to go back to the gear icon at the top of the right corner window, right? And we're going to go ahead and click Account and Settings. And the tab that we're going to be focusing on will be the Expenses tab, okay? So once again, once we set up these settings, that means every time we do something that's for this this book or this profile, right? All these settings that we're doing here, so then when we enter in another bill or enter in something else, things populate. So again, let's go ahead and focus on the expenses tab. So there are 3 sections under the expenses tab, and these are the things that we're going to modify right now. So the first section we have here is going to be looking at bills and expenses. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I just clicked on it, right? You can use the pencil icon to also edit the settings here, but in this case, I just went ahead and just clicked right on to this tab, okay? So first thing you have here, show items, tables on and an expense, okay? And of course, and purchases forms, of course, right? That is definitely something you want to have on there, is to view what items that you're purchasing or what items that you're selling, right? Especially when you're purchasing for, in this case, when you're purchasing items from vendors, you want to have it explicitly listed on the actual bill or things like that, okay? So here's right here on the PowerPoint, it tells you that we are going to be check marking all options as on, okay? So let's see what the next one is, all right? So here's a show tags fields on the expenses and purchases forms, of course, right? So tags, right, if you remember from yesterday's lesson, we took a look at how tags can be very useful for keeping track of your forms and things like that by categorizing in unique little topics, right? So for instances, like if you guys heard of hashtags or things like that, you just type in what that topic was and it will populate all of those things that you referred each transaction by, okay? So in this case, yes, I want to have tags on, okay? Next one says track expenses and items by customer. So this one is going to be more towards for when we talk about in chapter 9, where we talk about billable expenses. So in this case, yes, of course, if a customer decides to ask you to buy something for them, okay, then yes, you definitely want to track those expenses by the customer, right? And then it says we're here, make expenses and items billable. So this is where after you assign those items, or if you purchase things for your customers, you can go ahead and turn it around and send them the bill. Okay, so then this is where you get that option where are you going to mark them up with a default rate of percentage? Yes. And then that's where this section here says that you want to make sure that it is 50% markup. So in this case, we're going to charge our customers a 50% markup. Okay? So that means instead of selling them at the price that you purchased it for, you're marking up the price 50%, so then they pay you a little portion for, profits. Okay? And it says so here, track billable expenses and items as income. Of course, right? And we'll talk about more of this again in chapter 9, where we actually take a look at how we bill a customer for all of these items that we have to purchase as a vendor. All right, and it says right here, sales tax, no. Terms, 30 per, okay, billable as a single line. You want them on. Okay. Sales tax, no. And then in terms, net 30. And you're going to have to go to purchase orders section to turn on purchase orders. Okay. So then over here, charge sales tax. We already said, we said no to that one. But that's okay. I'm going to charge them anyway. I think it will depend. So if you remember, if you do toggle this and have it as a setting, just remember that you can make changes on the actual sales form itself, and we'll talk about that in chapter 3. Okay. And then it says default billable payment terms. We said net 30. Okay. And then we can go ahead and save this section here. All right. Then we have to go down to purchase orders and make sure that it is on. Yes, we are going to be using purchase orders. Not particularly in this chapter, but we will see it in chapter 9, and especially when we dive into chapter 10 for inventory, right? We'll see how to use purchase orders for inventory. Okay, so in this case, save this section here. All right. So now we saved our settings for the expenses tab. So now we can go ahead and move on forth to the next section here, which is actually to start and dive right into adding our vendors. Okay. So how do we keep track of our company expenses? Okay. Now, usually expenses, they are derived by making purchases from our vendors, because our vendors could be either or a supplier, right? A person who provides some kind of service to us, whether they are our landlord. They are going to be people that you are going to be relying on to either to supply you with items, to sell your inventory, or they are people who provide you some kind of service to go ahead and allow you to operate your business. So how do we keep track of these? Well, you have 3 options, right? You can either use an accounts payable, which is going to be using the enter bills function, okay? You can either pay them at time of service or at time of the service or at time of purchase, right? Usually we could have that. There's a section called expenses that allows you to pay for those items, whether you're using a credit card, debit card, an electronics funds transfer, okay? And then, of course, if you are planning to utilize the write a checks function, which is going to be using Intuit's printable checks feature, where you get to go ahead and write your checks directly through your QuickBooks online, and you can print them out in your office. Okay, so there's our rules and regulations on what you need to do when you have those types of checks that you have to print out. Okay, but those are the three options that you can use to keep track of your expenses. Either one, entering in a bill to create an accounts payable, and then pay the bill to reduce it. And again, right, and then yet the expenses tab and the write a checks function tab. Okay. All right, and then of course we also need to identify our types of vendors. Okay. So when we have our different types of vendors, like we'll explore the expenses center in a few seconds here. But when we have the vendor center, right, we have to identify that there are two types of vendors, right? You have your cash vendors and you have your credit vendors. Cash vendors are going to be the vendors that you pay with cash, or you pay at time of service or at time of purchase, right? Where your credit vendors are going to be the ones that you have an account with them and you owe them credit to, or they give you credit and you use those credits and then you end up paying them later. Okay, so that's the most key important thing that you need to know here is what is the difference between your cash and your credit vendors. Okay, so one of them you pay right then and there, and others you record a bill and you pay them later. Okay, so this table kind of sums up what those different types are and what you're going to be using. So again, if you have those cash vendors, you're paying at time of service, so you'll be using your expenses tab or your expenses function, or you'll use your write a checks function. Okay. And then for your credit vendors, right, those ones you will use the enter bills function as well as the pay bills function. Okay. It is very key that you know the difference between the different functions I am talking about, because each one is related to each other and each one affects the accounts differently. So as we know, right, we know the difference between cash versus accrual basis, right? We learned that in chapter 1. When we understand that the cash basis, that means if we're using cash to pay for our vendors or for our purchases, right, it immediately takes money away from our account right then and there. But when we use a credit vendor, right, we're entering in a bill, creating an accounts payable, and then later on we have to use pay bills function, right, because pay bills function is directly correlated to the accounts payable, right, or the pay bills function. You have to use the pay bills function in order to reduce an accounts payable, okay? And because those two are going to be related to each other, the pay bills is going to, again, essentially take the money away from your company, but not now, it's later in a future date, okay? So let's go ahead and first talk about setting up our vendors. So for the previous example, right, I believe in chapter 2, we got to take a look at how to import our products and services list. Well, we can also import our vendors list, same exact way, or if you want to go to the vendor center, you're able to do that as well. So let's explore those options real quick. So we already have a preset file already available for the Imagine Photography, and what that does is it allows you to save a lot of time, especially when you are building your brand from if you're a pre-existing company and you already have a list of vendors that you use, then it makes it that much more easier to go ahead and completely fill out your company file, because you have all the you have all the components that you need. You just have to fill them in, right? But if you're starting from scratch, then your vendors list is going to be built up upon one at a time. So in this case, if I go to my expenses tab here on the left navigation bar here, you have vendors at the top, right? And it gives you the option to you can either import your vendors from a pre-existing file, or you can just start adding your vendors in one at a time, okay? So let's go ahead now. You could either do it this way, or you could do it like we did yesterday, where we go up to the gear icon, right? And we can go ahead and click on import data. Okay, there are 6 things that you can import into QuickBooks, and vendors is going to be one of the lists that you can do that. Okay, but since I'm already here in my expenses tab under my vendors tab, right? I'm going to go ahead and click on import vendors list. Okay, so you're going to get this window that will pop up, and what you're going to do is you're going to locate where you put your vendors list file. So in this case, I've already had it downloaded onto my computer. So I'm going to go ahead and click on browse, and what we're going to do is we're going to locate where that is. Okay, so we're going to go to QuickBooks Class, QuickBooks Online. We're going to go ahead and go to Lectures, Imagine Photography, right here, QuickBooks Online Classroom Files. And then we're going to locate my vendors list. So right here, I have Imagine Photography, Imagine Vendors. I'm going to double click on that. Now, it has to be a CVS file, CSV file, or it has to be an actual Excel document, okay? Now, of course, you can also download a sample file so you know exactly what kind of headers you need to organize your vendors list by, because that's going to make it much more easier to go ahead and import, because if you download the sample file, right, you could just copy your vendors list into it and organize your columns to fit the same exact way. So once I have that in here, right, I have the Imagine vendors file on here. I'm going to go down to the bottom of the window where it says next. Okay, so now this is where it tells me I need to line up my columns accordingly, right? So every file, right, every folder has a list of the items in order, and it's going to also have headers at the top. Okay, so in this case, right, my file has, the company file on there. It has the vendor's name, the vendor's phone number, things like that. Okay, if you don't have anything that matches, that's fine, because QuickBooks should do it for you automatically. Unless there's something in red, it will flag you to let you know what is wrong with the file that you need to make changes to. All right, so in this case, it has identified that it's got the company's name there, right? The name, the company, and so on, and the phone number and address and things like that, okay? So here you go. You got the street, city, state, and so on and so forth. So right now, all of these tabs are already pre-lined. Nothing is in red, so we can go ahead and click next. Okay, so this is where it shows up and says to us, okay, so these are the files, these are the names that you have right now. You currently have 7 vendors on this list, and here they are. And they want you to view it because they want to make sure that when you transfer this information over, is this information correctly in the correct spots, in the correct tabs, right, or the correct headers. So in this case, yes, they all looking like they're all in the same and correct headings and columns. Okay, so again, I'm going to go ahead and click finish here, and this should import your list over, and you should get this little bar here that says successfully 7 out of 7 vendors have been imported, and now this is what your vendor center will look like. Okay, so here's your list of all the vendors that you are on your list, right? The people that you're going to be using to purchase your items from or provide a service to you, right? At the very top of the vendors list, you have 4 bars. This will tell you how many vendors you owe, how much money you owe, which ones are overdue, which ones are pending, and which ones have been paid. So in this way, it gives you a little chart to kind of let you get to see everything that you can right at top at the window there. And on top of that, on this little opening balance right here, on the bottom, on the right side here, allows you to see how much you owe each individual vendor. Okay? And you could do some batch actions too. The most that you can do here is just to make them inactive, which we'll talk about. You can search your vendor if you'd like. And this is where you can also, if you have another list that you want to import, you can import more, or you can just go ahead and add a brand new vendor in here. Okay? Now, the cool thing about this is you are able to print this out, or you are able to export this file. Now, what this does is right here is that if you're adding more and more and more vendors to your list, right, then let's say you decided to stop using QuickBooks Online and you want to move to QuickBooks desktop file or something like that, or maybe you want to download a copy for your boss or something, right? You're able to do that by clicking this button right here where it says export to Excel, and you would save the copy of all the vendors that you have with the appropriate account balances. You can even print this out if you need a copy, and then this right here, this gear icon, allows you to filter the information that you want to appear on your vendor center. So if I only want to see I don't want to see anybody's phone number, I can just click this and it will get rid of their phone number, so you don't see their phone number. But in this case, I think a phone number is important to have. I believe an email is also important to have, right? Maybe you don't want to check them to the point, you don't want to check them off, right? Or you don't want to call them, you want to email them. But in this case, the email shouldn't be there, okay? They tell you to put your own email in there, but don't worry about that, okay? And there's other things that you can do and filter around here too. How many vendors do you want to see per page? Okay? All right? And so on and so forth. Okay? And yes. All right? So that is the vendor center. So let's see what the first task they want you to do is. They want you to edit a vendor. Okay? Now, editing a vendor, right, is very easy, because if you can add a vendor at any given point in time, right, and let's say you make a mistake or something happened along the way, or maybe there's something that maybe the vendor, they changed their address because they moved to a different place, or they changed their phone number. For whatever reason, you need to change information that you've already placed into your QuickBooks. You are 100% able to do that at any given point in time. Okay, now let's show you how to edit a vendor profile. Okay, so oftentimes you'll have a little section right here that will allow you to see action. So right here, right, I have to pull my screen. Let me shorten up my screen here. So here, you're gonna have this on your screen. It's a little action, tab here, right, on what things you can do. Now, as you can see, if I click on this drop-down menu, I can create an expense, I can write a check to them, I can create a purchase order, or I can make them inactive. None of those options allow me to edit their profile, okay? Now, most cases, for example, for your editing your chart of accounts, you'll have it there. But for this case, because the way that the QuickBooks application is working for you, they don't have everything all in one area, okay? So in this case, these actions only allow you to create bills, create purchase orders, create expenses, right? And so on and so forth, right? So these actions are not for editing or anything like that, right? This action is in case, hey, you got billed by a vendor, or you need to buy something from a vendor. You could use those options by going to this window here, okay? But I want to edit my vendor. So how do I edit my vendor? So here is what you need to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first person we need to edit here. So we need to edit Esther Gandhi, okay? So let's go ahead and locate Esther Gandhi. Okay, so we got Dan Kahn, we got Aaron, we got Esther Gandhi, right? You see when I roll my mouse over it, it highlights the name in blue. So that means I can click on that. It's a link that I can click on. And when I click on Esther Gandhi, this shows me everything I need to know about Esther Gandhi, right? This allows me to see all my transactions with just Esther Gandhi. This allows me to view my vendor's information. And when I get to see my vendor's information, boom, guess what? You got the edit button right here. And that is how you're going to be editing a vendor's profile, by clicking on that edit button under vendor details, okay? But remember, in order to get there, you need to click on the actual vendor to see the vendor profile. Then you need to go to the bottom, the middle section here, and select vendor detail to be able to edit the profile. Okay, so in case a vendor changes their address, changes their phone number, maybe they need to change their name, for whatever reason that you need to make changes to, then you're going to edit that information there. So this one, they want us to change Esther Gandhi for the display name. They want you to change it to, Gandhi Videos LLC. Okay? So here we have a company name and a vendor display name. What is the difference between the customer name and the the company name and the vendor display name? So one of them is for your records and the other one is for QuickBooks records, okay? Now, display name is going to allow to put some kind of unique characteristics on QuickBooks to allow you to pull up the information very easily, right? So again, think about when you go to Google, right? And you type in a few letters and you see a list of things that are possibility answers. That's called an algorithm, okay? When we put a display name into QuickBooks, right? It performs some kind of algorithm so that when I type in a couple letters, let's say I type in Gandhi, right? It's the name that should pop up would be Gandhi, okay? But for company name, right? That's for my purposes only, right? So I know that Gandhi, right? Her name is actually Esther, right? So as you can see, company name says right here, Gandhi Video LLC, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this right here, and I'm going to paste it into display name because I don't want Esther Gandhi to show up. I want Gandhi Videos LLC's name to show up, okay? And of course, you can leave the first name as Esther and the last name is Gandhi. So there you go, Gandhi Video LLC. Right? Any other changes that you need to make to this profile? We need to change the billing rate to 95, net 30, and of course, do we want to track payments for 1099? Yes, we do, because Gandhi is a 1099 contracted worker. Okay? So let's go down to the billing section here. Okay? So so here we go. Taxes. Right? We're going to say, yes, track this as a 1099 person. Cost rate. Okay, so cost rate is going to be 95. Okay? And then it says billing. Oh, wait, here. Not cost rate. Cost rate is different. Billing rate is $95. That's what you need to make a change here. That's what the book tells you, right? That you're going to change it to 95 and it's going to be net 30. So terms, if you have terms, net 30. Okay? Now, what am I doing here is I'm just filling in information that I acquired from each and every single person's profile, right? But in this case, when we actually dive into the next one, which is actually adding somebody in here, right? Then you're going to need to know about a few details about each and every single person. So now that I've filled that in here, right, and I clicked save, right, all of Gandhi's information is now in here, right? And it's now considered Gandhi Video LLC, okay? Now, how do I go back to the vendors list? If I clicked on that back button, I don't know, you saw it. Sorry, I clicked it a little too fast. It was at that little button right next to Gandhi Video LLC. I clicked on it, and it took me back to the vendor center. Now, of course, you can always go back to the expenses center, right? And then click on vendors, and you'd be able to get to the same spot anyway, okay? So there you go. That was my very first one that I changed. So you're responsible to go ahead and make changes to every single one of these, okay? So the next one is Donna Distributing, okay? So we need to take Donna Distributing, okay? Let's see, Vicky Barton, Shannon Ogaga. Let me see who is. Okay, so Shannon. I'm not gonna even attempt to pronounce that. Grosskirth. You're gonna change that one to Donna Distributing right here. Okay. Oh, it says right here the company name is Donna Distributing. All right. So then you're gonna. So now that I clicked on her profile, I am going to vendor details. And I'm going to edit and change it to Donna Distributing. Okay? Donna Distributing. And then it says that you want to have the terms to be net 30. Okay? Save. And then this is what I was talking about, this little back button here. If you click on that, it will take you back to the vendor center. Okay? So now I have Donna Distributing at the second right here. Okay? And let's see. Okay? You need to edit Aaron Long to Aaron Long CPA. Okay? That's up to you if you want to make those changes here. Vicky Barton is going to be Barton Insurance Incorporated. So I'm just going to change that one for now. Okay, so let's just do Vicky Barton, and then the rest of them, you need to be responsible to finish the rest of them, okay? So Vicky Barton, okay, we're going to edit her information to say that it is Barton Insurance Incorporated. Okay, and save, right? Now, of course, for any, so you're, all the information that you're plugging in here, the purpose of creating lists, so we talked about this yesterday too, is essentially what those lists do, right? So I've created my vendors list. So what sole purpose does this help me with? Well, this helps you, one, keep track of your expenses, right? So if you owe a particular vendor, right, there's a place for it to keep track of it, right? And we talked about that's called the subsidiary ledger in the accounting class, right? So this is more or less the same thing as your subsidiary ledger, except now it's called the vendor center, and you're keeping track of all your vendors and all the money that you either owe or have paid, okay? Now, with that being said now, especially when we fill out our forms, I'm going to show you something that's really cool when we dive into dropping into our expenses, our very first bill and things like that. Every person that you put in here is only going to make it that much easier for you to quickly fill out each form. Because each form will auto-populate with the information that you put into your QuickBooks. So for example, I need to put a vendor's name on here. I type in a few letters, it will create a drop-down list for me, and I just select the vendor right then and there. So there you go. We have Donna Distributing. Okay, we have Barton Insurance, and that is it for this section here. Okay, for editing the information here. But let's actually talk about adding a vendor, okay? Because since we've been working with Imagine Photography for previous years prior for the QuickBooks desktop, this one is from that exact one here. So let's go ahead and practice adding a vendor so you know how much information you need to collect about each particular vendor, okay, to create their profile. So let's go ahead and dive right into the vendor center once again. So here's the vendor center, right? And what you're going to notice is, again, we're going to do the same thing here. So we're not going to go, so we're going to exit Barton, okay, and back to the vendor center. And then, okay, go back to the vendor center. Okay, so back to the vendor center, right? And the top right you have right here is add new vendor or new vendor, okay? So when I click on that, there are 5 sections that you need, right? You need their contact information, you need their address, you need a notes to them, and then additional information about them, okay? So but I split this section, the additional information, as 2 sections, right? Because you need to have one for their billing purposes, and then you need one for their payment purposes, okay? So here, let's take a look at here. The very first section is you need to have their company name and their display name and so on and so forth, right? Now, again, nothing is obligated. The only thing that you absolutely definitely need is at least a vendor display name, right? Because this is what's going to populate on your list of vendors, right? This is the one that you're using QuickBooks to search up your vendor. So in this case, right, what is the company name? It's going to be Boswell Consulting, okay? Called Boswell Consulting is the company name. Boswell Consulting, okay? And right now, it automatically populated right here into the vendor name, which is fine, okay? That's what I want. I want it to appear as Boswell Consulting. Who is the person's name here? Person's name is Mr. Stephen Boswell, okay? So if you want to add Mr., you can. That's the title here, Mr. First name is Stephen, okay? Last name is Boswell. Okay. Email, it's going to be Steve at Boswell right now dot, it might be b.biz. Let's check. Steve Boswell right now .us. Okay. Does Steve have a phone number? Let's see. His phone number is going to be 510-555-0305. Okay, so 510-555-0305. And does he have a fax number? All right, if he does, then you need to fill in that information there. So it is the same exact number, except the last 4 is 5500. So 510-555-5500. Okay. Does he have another phone number or other method? Does he have a website? Yes, www.boswellrightnow.us. Okay? And then what is the name that you're going to be writing on his checks? Mr. Stephen Boswell. In this case, you don't need the Mr. You can just leave it at Stephen Boswell. Okay? All right. So now that we filled in the primary contact information, now the next section is to fill in the address. If there is no address to fill in, then you can go ahead and skip on forward. All right, so here you go. His address is actually a postal office box, so P.O. Box 620 to Oakland, California, 94610. Okay? So let's go ahead and add in the address. So street name, no street name, but it is a postal box. Postal office box 620. Okay. City, Oakland, California. City, state, California. Zip 94610. Okay. Now, for any reason that if this isn't, you can't find this address or you want to actually get the exact address, you can go ahead and click Maps. This uses Google Maps to look up the actual address, so then when you actually click on it, right, it will fill in all the information for you to get the exact address and location, just so then in case you make a typo or anything like that, it would auto correct it so you don't get mail returned back to you. But in this case, I'm not going to map it because in this case, whether this is a real address or not, right? I'm just gonna leave the information exactly how I see it here. Okay, make sure you put in the United States for country. Okay, any notes that you want to say for Mr. Stephen Boswell? Well, if there's any additional notes that you want to enter in, that is up to you. For instance, maybe you have something special. Maybe he has a credit account or something like that. You can go ahead and fill that in. Or if you have an account with Mr. Stephen Boswell, then you can go ahead and fill that in there as well. Okay? For other extra information. Okay? But in this case, we are good, so we can go ahead and click on the next section here. So in this case, any other additional information. Okay, so in this case, taxes, right? He has a business ID or a social security number. So in this case, right, tax ID is for the purposes of filing for taxes, right? Especially for 1099 workers, okay? This is so you can choose a tax business ID or a social security number, especially when they are an independent contractor. They can use a social security number to recognize them as an independent contractor. Now, by clicking on tracking payments as a 1099, right, what this happens is that this does go ahead and go through the system, through the IRS, to confirm that this is a 1099 worker, right? Because anybody can say, yeah, I own my own business. I work as a 1099 worker, right? And if they do a job for you and they're reporting the income for you on their end, and you submit your personal or whoever is submitted their personal taxes, right? And it finds out that they are not a 1099 worker, there's a lot of things that can happen with that person, right? And the business that you're doing with that individual person can affect your business as well. So that is exactly what we need this social security number for, is to ensure that they are indeed a 1099 worker and that they are using this expense as a writable tax to them, right? So in this case, 123-121234 is their number. 123-121234. Okay, and you want to make sure that it is you're tracking it as a 1099 person. Okay. What are the costs for Mr. Boswell? In this case, we don't have a specific one, but we do have some terms that can be put in here. Okay, so in this case, They want a 2% term. So I don't have it on here just yet, but we can go ahead and add that into your sales form whenever you need to, okay? And then a billing rate, we don't have any costing rate because in this case, baby, we're seeking Boswell Consulting as a professional services, okay? So in this case, right here under account number, do you have an account number with them? Yes, you do, 661. So remember, this is your account number with Stephen Boswell, okay? So do not confuse the two, okay? So default expenses, what do you use Stephen Boswell for? We use them for professional, legal, let's see what we have. Okay, so nothing there. How about legal? We should have legal in here. Legal and accounting services, right? Or legal fees. Legal fees, okay? I think that would be the best one. Legal fees, okay? Because they are a professional person, so I'm going to go ahead and associate it with legal fees, okay? All right. So we're going to go ahead and do legal fees. All right, and what's the account balance as of the date? That's where you're gonna put in the last, so opening balance. Now they recommend you not to put in anything into the opening balance. Why? Because you have to understand this, right? If you create an opening balance in here, right? Yes, it will show up that you owe Stephen Boswell X amount of dollars. But when you use QuickBooks as a system, right, and you're entering in bills and you're paying those bills off, and then you write a check to Boswell, it's going to make no association to why you have this $1,000 opening balance with this person, right? So the best way to actually do an opening balance is by retroactive putting in all of your historical records in one at a time, especially with accounts payable, right? So you'll learn that in chapter 12, remember, where they say, oh, you need to put in all of your accounts payable balances in there by putting in all of the bills that you currently owe. So in this case, opening balances for any person, any account is a no-no, okay? You don't want to add anything in there because then QuickBooks is not going to know what bill that you're paying or who you're paying and why you're paying this, okay? So it's also a rule of thumb that you want to keep this balance as 0. But if you do owe Stephen Boswell money, you want to record that retroactively, right? You want to add that bill in later, okay? And of course, the date that you are going to be putting in here is going to be December of last year, okay? Because we're going to say that we're going to create a first bill, which is going to be on the 1st of January. So we want to make sure that his account balance is as of December 31st, okay? And once I filled in all of my information, I can go ahead and click Save. Okay, so then now I have Boswell Consulting as my first vendor in here. No, I don't. He might be under, Mr. Stephen Boswell. There he is, Boswell Consulting. Okay. Let me just double confirm that his vendor name should be, oh, it changed it. All right, this has to be Boswell Consulting. It was like that earlier, now it changed. So there you go, Boswell Consulting. Okay, save. So now he should be at the top of the list once again now. There you go, Boswell Consulting. No, he's not. Stephen Boswell might be a glitch in the system. Okay. There you go, Boswell Consulting, right under Barton Insurance. Okay, so that is all the information that you need for a vendor. Now, for any reason that, let's say you do a quick stop shop to a a random store, is it necessary that you have to fill in all this information for a particular vendor? And the answer is no, okay? The reason why we do this for the sake of entering all this information is because it will auto-fill and auto-populate your forms. So it makes it that much quicker to fill out your forms. Hence the word QuickBooks, right? The purpose of having QuickBooks is you want to put in your bill and quickly get out and quickly be done, right? And how do you make that possible? You make that possible by creating your list, and so then everything auto populates, so it fills everything a lot more quick and a lot more easily, okay? And we'll take an example and look at how easy it is, right? But if you're looking at a vendor where, let's say, for instance, you're driving down the road and you decided to stop by some random Walmart, do you need to have the exact location of that Walmart that you just went to? No, right? But the fact that you just went to Walmart in general would probably be the best thing that you could do there. Just at least add in the company Walmart. Doesn't matter what location you go to, but you went to the Walmart company, right? So that is probably something that you want to have as a vendor display name in your vendor's list, says that I went to Walmart to purchase all of these supplies, right? But you don't need to have the specific address or the specific phone number or any other information in regards to that Walmart corporation, right? You just utilize Walmart to buy some random supplies, right, that you happen to drive down the street. So no, you do not need to have full information about a vendor. The most that you need is just the vendor name, okay? But this helps a lot, especially if you are working with this vendor that often bills you things and you need to bill them back and send them back, right? Or pay the bill and you need to send that check to their actual facility. That is where the addresses are going to play an important role, because then it will automatically fill in for you. And if you use the Google Maps, it will take you exactly that exact location without having that mail to be returned back to you. So again, it's powerful to fill in as much as information, but if you don't need to, but if it's not necessary, you don't need to fill in all the details. Okay. All right. So now we explored the vendor center already. Okay. So what other reports can you do for a vendor? So this one, you can create a vendor report, okay? And what those reports can actually do is you can actually make a vendor contact list, okay? So we're going to take a little trip over here to this little section called the reports section here. Okay, where reports under the left navigation bar, okay? And this is going to be under the people that you owe, okay? Or people who you owe. So I'm going to eliminate this. So people who owe you, no. That's your customers. But what you owe will be it. And this is where you can create a vendor contact list. Okay, so you got the vendor balance information. Hold on, let me see who you owe. 1099, bill payment, unpaid bills, vendor balance details. Okay, so the vendor contact list is actually under expenses and expenses and vendors. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, there you go. Vendor contact list. So if I click on that, this will give me a list of all of my vendors and all the information that I have about these vendors. So remember, we imported 7 vendors and we created 1 vendor, right? We created Stephen Boswell. So in this case, if you take a look here, right, each one you got a list of every single vendor, all their contact information such as their phone numbers, their email. So again, Stephen's the only one that you have an email for, full name, and then you got their addresses, right? So there you go. That is the report that you can do for creating the vendor contact list. So again, that's under the expenses and vendors tab. Okay. All right, so we're going to take a break here, and then when we come back, we will go ahead and enter in our very first bill, and so on and so forth.